Good morning and welcome. I am Abigail Williams, CEO of United to Learn, and on behalf of the entire U2L team, thank you for joining us today. We have the unique pleasure of partnering with many of you, Dallas ISD leaders, private school partners, engaged faith-based institutions, businesses, individual volunteers, and our board and advisory council. I know we all share a vision and commitment to accelerating student achievement and developing purposeful leaders. And I know you will also agree with me that regardless of our individual circumstances, the last few months have been a wild ride for all of us. So before we dive into a rich discussion with today's panelists, I want to begin by sharing just a glimpse of what you all made possible in our new normal.
Definitely happy to be here. I'm working with United to Learn, and since late March, we've been working alongside HPUMC and Christ Foundry to distribute over 56,000 meals.
Thank you all. Thank you, investors, staff, and volunteers who made all that possible and continue to support us right through last week's very successful North Texas Giving Day. So on to our main event. I know you are eager to learn from today's panelists. Their resilience and visionary leadership is stewarding learning across 47 of our city's Dallas ISD elementary schools, partnering with United to Learn. So with us today, I'll begin with an exemplary principal, Principal Sandra Barrios of Jack Lowe Elementary, where she has responsibility for over 600 students. Under her leadership, Jack Lowe is located in Northeast Dallas and part of the Conrad feeder pattern, is not only an A-rated, but is a blue ribbon recognized school. Next with us today is Dr. Stephanie Boyce, Chief Educational Officer of the Fresh Classroom. Dr. Boyce is a passionate edupreneur and reshaping the education landscape. You'll understand a little bit better about what that all means in a bit. Next, welcome Mr. Isaac Rosas. He is a fourth grade teacher at Burnett Elementary, and as my teenager taught me, a highly acclaimed YouTuber. So many of us were fortunate to meet Mr. Rosas early on as he was beginning his exploration of social and emotional strategies. But today you'll learn on how he is sharing that expertise and being leveraged far beyond his home campus at Burnett. Finally, we also have Dr. Cheryl Wilson, who is the Dallas ISD Executive Director responsible for 12 elementary schools, including 6 of our partner campuses that are within the Lincoln, Madison, and Roosevelt feeder patterns. Her enthusiasm for student learning and belief in the potential of every student is absolutely unparalleled. How are you all today? You know, in an effort to make today's conversation a little bit more interactive, we want to encourage all of you to use your chat box to communicate with us. So at least I know already you should have fuller bios of each one of these amazing leaders in your box. I also want you to tell us how you're feeling. So let's see if we can leverage our chat box to share a little bit about how we're feeling this morning. Whether the enduring, evolving health epidemic is top of mind for you today, or you're thinking more about how we're all grappling the realities of the racial injustice across our society. We want to know how you feel. I think it will inform the course of our conversation today. But let's begin with those on the front lines, our principal and teacher. So I recently ran by Studi Williams Elementary, and the school sign read, "We're back." And I thought to myself, I don't think you guys ever went away. So Principal Barrios, tell us, what was the summer like? And how has life been since September 8th as Dallas ISD officially welcomes students back with virtual learning in full swing?
So summer was non-existent. It went by very, very quickly, and life has been extremely busy since even the summer and throughout this entire time. So we just haven't stopped running, just to make sure that everything is, where it needs to be.
Gotcha. We don't have the benefit of being on your campuses. We generally love to host these meetings across our community. So tell us, what does it feel like to actually be on a campus today?
It's different. In a way, it feels very secure because we do have a lot of the PPE. We have a lot of signs everywhere, marking 6 feet distance. We have the plexiglass. We have all these different items to help us feel more secure. But it can also be nerve-wracking because you know that people are hesitant about getting back. We all know what's at stake. So we do know that it is it's a very different time.
Dr. Wilson, you're on campuses and with principals every day as well. How would you characterize the climate on your campuses?
I would say that the halls may be quiet, but there's lots of energy in the air. So teachers are more determined now than ever to ensure that students are getting what they need. They have paid great attention to meeting the needs of students when it comes to SEL, when it means to connecting with students and their families. So they're really, really trying very hard to make sure that students get what they need. So the energy is high.
Awesome. And Mr. Rosas, tell us more about your day, even today. Tell us what happened this morning as you greeted your, I don't know, 16, 24 students on Zoom, perhaps?
Yeah, this morning, logged on at 7:55, students started coming in, and one way that I take attendance is to infuse some mindfulness. So we start with like taking 3 deep breaths to calm that nervous system. And then we talked about what are you present to? And it could be an emotion, it could be a physical sensation, it could be a thought. And when I call their names, the way they say attendance is, I feel present to, could be hunger, could be boredom, but also being trauma informed, I give them a choice. And sometimes they have a choice to pass. But I think starting the day like that, where maybe a kid can say, I feel nervous today, and another kid that feels nervous hears that, it sort of creates that sense of community amidst the stress of the uncertainty. So that's how we started our day today.
Well, some of us are nervous this morning. Some of us are a little down with our rainy Tuesday. So what do you think you could share with us? What would be part of our morning meeting exercise? Can you walk us through something that might help motivate us through what otherwise could be a rainy, dreary day?
Sure. This activity I do maybe like a month into my SEL lessons, and it's called Gladdening the Mind. And it's sort of an activity that helps you activate the feel-good parts of your brain. So I invite you to just sit up straight. You might want to place your hands on your lap, and you want to close your eyes. And let's start by taking 1 deep, slow breath. And slowly let it go. Let it go. Let it go. And let's do another one. Inhale. We slowly let it go. Let it go. One last deep breath. Inhale. And let it go. Let it go. And start breathing as you normally do. And I want you to focus your attention to a person or a living being, or it could be either a spiritual being or a character from a book, but somebody that you feel joy when you bring them to mind. It could be a spouse, it could be your child, it could be your pet, your dog. And I want you to picture their face, picture their eyes, the way they look at you when you come home, when you embrace them, their scent, the way their body feels against yours when you're hugging them, the sound of their voice or the sound of their bark if it's a pet. Now I want you to focus your attention on your body. What physical sensations do you feel manifesting in your body? Could it be tingling, warmth? Is your heart beating a little faster? Anything softening for you? Your shoulders? And so what we're doing is we're accessing that part of the brain that releases the oxytocin and those good feel chemicals. Slowly, you may start to open your eyes. And you might feel a difference, you might not, everybody's different. But this is a great activity that when you're feeling stressed or unmotivated, access the memories of the people that you love. And it will trigger physical sensations and neurochemistry to hopefully get you started on a positive note.
You certainly helped me. But I think that I heard that you're not just helping your students and maybe not even just the teachers there at Burnett Elementary. Talk to us a little bit about this website that maybe you've recently launched and a little bit of what your new normal has been in sharing out some of your expertise.
Sure. Well, first, I'll start by saying that this summer, United to Learn gave me the great opportunity to share some of this wisdom that I've been collecting through research and personal experiences. And I was able to do a video series in Spanish and in English on mindfulness for families and educators. And that was kind of like the cornerstone for this website that I created for our school, Burnett Mindfulness website, where I've collected artifacts and videos and activities for our teachers to implement mindfulness in the classroom, and included are those videos that I did for United. I think the whole talk about SEL and mindfulness could be a little bit daunting, right, for some teachers. So hopefully this website could help anybody that is wanting to know a little bit more about mindfulness. And regarding how it's going in the classroom, these techniques that I've been preaching about, I have been able to really put forth for myself. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of new things going on with technology and the whole logistics of everything. And so being mindful and just using these techniques for myself has been invaluable.
I think that not only are you sharing this with your campuses, but I hear that other principals are sharing out. I was reading a newsletter for Chapel Hill where you were also highlighted as well. So I thank you for being willing to share your expertise, not only for your own students, but recognizing that there are hundreds and thousands of students across our community whose teachers can benefit from knowing that as well. You know, you brought up a word when you were talking us through that wonderful exercise about how it feels to embrace someone or embrace something that means an awful lot to you. And I know that that's something that teachers have historically done when you're in person, right? You get to embrace your students. So I'd love to hear from you guys. How does it feel to be having to pivot, having to flex and deliver this traditional curriculum now in a technical platform where you getting your virtual hugs? Are elbow bumps enough? And how are you compensating for that?
Well, I guess I can get started. for our virtual meetings, we've created some sort of rituals. For example, demonstration of acknowledgement. When a student participates, I ask them to give snaps or spirit fingers. We can feel the touch, but we can see the intention behind some of our movements. And so that's one of the ways that hopefully I'm fostering that sense of connection and community. And also as well, modulating your voice. Research shows that if you slow down your voice and you kind of apply a sing-songy tone, you are giving that feeling of comfort to the student, even though you can't physically give it to them. So just those brain hacks have been really helpful.
I love the attention on individual teachers and what you are able to create for them to be able to speak to individual students. But Principal Barrios, it seems that these stories that we're hearing of individual teachers going to extraordinary lengths, we are very fortunate in Dallas ISD that that's relatively commonplace. I struggle to find any Dallas ISD teacher who is not individually putting themselves through all of that, working tremendous hours through the summer to tackle both how do I continue to deliver that traditional curriculum and how do I do so within this new virtual platform. But I know that you, Principal Barrios, had to also think about the whole and a cohesive team, a cohesive culture and staff. Tell us a little bit about some of the new challenges around keeping that cohesion on your campus in particular, and what new supports became top of mind for you recently.
So first of all, I have to acknowledge that our teachers have been working so incredibly hard, and we have been trying to do everything that we can to support them. But, you know, it really feels like the principal's role changed a lot to be social emotional support for everybody. We have to be there emotionally and be able to take care of every single one of our faculty members. And it's not just the teachers, it's the teacher assistants, it's the front office staff, it's the CRCs, everybody here is working, you know, on overload to really help get back to normal. But right now we're having to deal with social emotional issues as well as racial unrest and you know, just anxiety and tension over everything that is happening right now in our current social climate. So those things have come to the top of my mind, and those have been things that have been really at the forefront of trying to build equity and trying to build cohesiveness as a school together.
And how were you able to tackle that over the summer? What did you choose to do?
Well, I am expert of nothing, but I know a little bit of everything. What I do know is that I can reach out to my partners. I actually reached out to Mia Murek, who is one of our contacts here in United to Learn, and Mia helped me get connected with Dr. Stephanie Boyce. And we were able to create a series of equity training for our campus here at Jack Low. And so lots of our teachers were able to join in. And, you know, it's funny, my teacher said that was, Ms. Barrios, that was the best training we've ever been to. You know, so it just really goes to show that the heart is still where the teachers have everything. And everybody is craving understanding. Everybody is craving to be heard. And when you provide them with those things, I think that, you know, wonderful things can happen. But it was through Mia Murek, United to Learn, Christine, different people that were able to gather around me, rally and say, this is what you need. Okay, we're going to bring it to you. And then I met the incredible Dr. Boyce. So she was able to bring her conference to us virtually.
Well, clearly your leadership is paving the way, but Dr. Boyce, I'd love to have you join the conversation with us. Talk to us a little bit about that collaboration with the United to Learn team, with Principal Barrios, and how you guys together, you know, really tailor designed equity training that in the most current environment and being tailored just for what Jack Low might need could come together.
Sure. Thank you so much again for having me. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your kind words, Principal Barrios. It's a great team there at Jack Lowe, and so well, when Mia reached out to me and Christine, we were able to have some initial conversations around what the need was at Jack Lowe. And contrary to a lot of schools that I go to and train across the country, I started pulling up data because that's what I do. And I'm like, oh, this is like a blue ribbon campus. Like they really have their stuff together. Like this is a great, like they're already on the right track. And so to me, it said a lot that Principal Barrios had still reached out in this current climate to design a PD experience that was going to really speak to an issue that some people are just not comfortable navigating. And so it was a great time sitting down to plan it because I have expertise in the subject matter of culturally responsive teaching. I mean, what that means, diversity, inclusion, that's my thing. But I am not at Jack Lowe, right? And so we got a chance to partner with United to Learn, with Principal Barrios to talk about what is the need on your campus. And then based on that, what are your 3 main objectives that you want your teachers to walk away with? Because when you open up this suitcase that's full of talk about racial injustice and equity, and there's so much and so many directions that you could go in, you could spend all year training on these things. And so it's like, what's based on your leadership at your campus and what you've seen and what your students need and your teachers need, what are the main objectives? And I asked her to just give me 3 that by the time they get done, you want them to have these understood. And then we tailor-made the PD experience for her campus, which is different than the principal the following week and what they needed at their campus. And so it was really great. And the team was very open to, when we created the safe space in the training, even though it was virtual, to be able to open up and share their authentic experiences. And that's something that teachers of color don't always get an opportunity to do in professional spaces. So it was enlightening for everyone to hear other people's experiences that usually just go untold. And it was a great day.
Tell us a little bit more about those objectives. What was it exactly that you guys were trying to achieve?
Okay, so Principal Barrios wanted to focus in on the impact of unconscious bias and kind of how that plays out in the classroom. That was one of our main focuses. And then the lens of empathy to walk in someone else's shoes. So we really had to spend some time talking about what empathy is because it's different than sympathy. And we had to talk about caring and how all of this isn't asking you to lower the bar and have pity, right? We don't have room for pity pedagogies with students in schools. And so that conversation and that focus on empathy was very important to Principal Barrios. And lastly, the focus on being okay with being uncomfortable. She said, I want them to know if you're becoming uncomfortable, that that's something that's going to be beneficial to you. And if you're not, then you're probably not digging deep enough yet. And so that was another focus that she really wanted them to get comfortable with being uncomfortable as we work through these different topics of discussion.
You know, we've been so fortunate to work with you, Dr. Boyce, and your trainings are really your entire way of life. And I know that you recognized the need for culturally responsive education, not as an adult, not as a professional, but as a student when you were so much younger. Can you just help us sort of walk in your shoes, help us understand what that means, and maybe that will help us even better understand the many students that we are fortunate to work with every day.
Sure. So as a student in schools, I had math deficits, extreme math deficits that manifested themselves in behavior issues. So I always tell teachers when we start the training, if you could imagine the one student that you wish you could just get rid of and like trade with another teacher, that I was that student for some of my teachers. But more so if it was a math class. Because I had experienced some teachers that passed me along because I was charming or because I was on their nerves and they didn't want to have to deal with me. And so it was easier to kind of like pass students along sometimes. And so I ended up going to alternative school multiple times and getting kicked out of the house. I went to jail when I was 16. And having all of these experiences, as I became a professional, I started to better understand some of these ideas seem very theoretical when you start reading about culturally responsive teaching. And you're like, oh, something else they want us to do in schools. As a teacher, it's always like, oh, there's something else I need to be doing. But once I started to get into the research as a master's student, I started to realize, oh, this was the missing link. My math teachers at the time couldn't help me understand some of these concepts because they weren't trying to connect them to my lived experience or my background knowledge or things that were important or relevant to me. And so some math concepts made perfectly good sense if somebody could have connected them to like my money, right? Like that was one of the concepts I understand more easily. Oh, so I'm trying to solve for X, and X is how much money someone owes me. Got it now, right? And so I just started to understand the role of becoming more culturally relevant and how important it is for teachers to fully understand the cultural composition of the students in order to be able to do that. Because you can't even make that connection if you're not clear about the cultural capital that those students have and already possess when they come into your school. So that's the short of it.
Okay. Well, you bring up a very important word, understand. What do we understand? And Principal Barrios, we are fortunate to work with you too on some Leader in Me initiatives, which are cultural systems for your campuses. And one of the tenets of that work is seek first to understand and then be understood. And it feels like that's exactly how you lead at Jack Lowe, and everyone benefits from that. As you are now gaining this new learnings, and you've just begun, this is just the beginning of this year and this series of work. Did you find that it was motivating, and what's the next step?
Yes, I actually found that it was really motivating and has already impacted the campus quite a bit. One of the first things that happened is last week I had a female Caucasian teacher. We had a discussion about something that had to occur in her classroom, and she looked at me and she said, "But Ms. Barrios, how is that going to look coming from a white Caucasian female?" And up until that point, I really had not thought of it. I was just, kind of going along with the work, but it did make her really aware of what her actions were and how it was going to be seen and represented in front of the students, in front of the parents. So, we were able to reflect back and, really take a step back and change the actions. But this is a person who I was really, really worried about whenever everything started, when we talked about, social unrest and anxiety. This is one of the people that was at the forefront of my mind. So to see that it captured her and that she was now rethinking everything, I was so proud of her. It really gave me goosebumps. It made me feel all the feels. It was just enlightening to be able to see that change was already brought about. But as we go forward, we are now starting our book study also. It's based on Dr. Boyce's presentation, and we are looking forward to beginning our book study and making sure that we are implementing culturally unbiased instruction into every one of our classrooms and making sure that our students know that they are loved. So we're really looking forward to it.
Can you tell us what the name of that book might be?
I think Dr. Boyce mentioned it earlier. Dr. Boyce?
Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. I think that's the one y'all are using?
Yes.
By Dr. Hammond. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it is a wonderful book. So far, it gives you lots of different instructional strategies to make sure that you are really kind of making sure that students are reflecting upon the instruction, and the teachers are reflecting upon their instruction and making sure that they're learning. So.
Thank you. Dr. Wilson, across many of your schools, you absolutely align with this philosophy of how we should be educating our students. but you are seeking to take it to the next level, really to the student and to curriculum. Can you share with us a little bit about how you are thinking about a collaboration to integrate culturally responsive education into daily curriculum, and why you think that that is so important and that we're ready for it?
Absolutely. I think it's very important to me that Black and Brown children have successful images of people who look like them. I also think it's imperative that teachers learn about the cultures of the students they serve. I know that we can't stop at the teachers. So in order to do that, we need to do it through culturally responsive education and infusing those cultural competencies into their classroom practices. So we have lesson plans that are written for teachers. So I want to layer that onto what we're doing. I knew that I couldn't just tell teachers about being culturally responsive. I wanted them to know that it was something that adds value to what it is that they do. So I'm going to work with an assistant professor from Georgia State University, and her name is Dr. Goldie Muhammad, and she's going to help teach our teachers how to layer these competencies into their lesson plans. So with the help of Abby, I just ran this by Abby one day. We just happened to be on the phone, and I was telling her about it and invited her to a meeting, and she jumped in full throttle with us to make sure that this was going to happen across the campuses. We want to make sure that we are building a collective community. We're quickly changing the way in which our students see themselves. There's enough negativity to be seen on the news. I want them to see the positive role models that they have to look for. So what the lesson plans will do, they're grounded in really 4 things, but the 3 that we'll focus on today are their identities. Children need to know who they are, and the teachers need to know who the children are. You can't teach who you don't know. Intellect, the capacity for knowledge, is what we learn and understand about various topics and ideals, and not just about ourselves, but looking outside of ourselves, how we connect to the greater community, as well as criticality, the ability to understand being anti-racist, to think critically, and for teachers and students to have different perspectives about marginalized communities and their ways of experiencing the world. So I think doing this in grades 3 through 5 will definitely have an impact on students. It'll definitely have a direct impact on teachers getting to know the students that they have the great opportunity to work with every day.
I think it sounds like you're about to make my lessons, my homework, a lot more interesting. Is that true? Can you give us just a really quick example of something that I might find more interesting if it was more culturally responsive?
Absolutely. So if you're reading a text, it's not just about reading about Mahatma Gandhi, right? We're not just reading about him, where we're also thinking about how we connect to some of the values that he had, and connecting that with conversations that you can have with your grandparents. I mean, we're virtual now, so this opens up the door to more opportunities to bring our parents into the learning, and our family members who live with us into the learning that's taking place in our campuses or in our classrooms.
Great. Well, and I know that that will lead to stronger student achievement. We can't pretend that these pandemics are not impacting the steady progress that so many of your campuses have been making recently. I'm sure that we all have read the McKinsey study that forewarned of more than 12 months of potential learning loss due to the COVID pandemic, especially around challenges of distance learning for our students who are living in poverty or struggling with connectivity. In Dallas ISD in particular, we're thrilled, we're proud that we have Dr. Hinojosa leading the district and Operation Connectivity to ensure that every student has a device in their home. I was fortunate enough to walk a couple of campuses, and down at Cedar Crest, I saw where you have 75-inch panels in every classroom that the district has made sure that we have as part of their IT programming. But we can't also pretend that this isn't going to be messy. right? And even Dr. Hinojosa has spoken about that. We've talked about, some of the issues with regard to how we fill our classrooms and how we manage enrollment and bring parents back in. So tell us a little bit more. What are some of the logistical challenges, quite honestly, Dr. Wilson, that might keep you up at night?
I'm glad you said messy, but not impossible, right? So student safety is what was keeping me up at night. The district has a great reentry plan that's extremely thorough. And I wanted to make sure that we had airtight systems at our campuses so that parents felt safe and that we return their kids to them better than when they drop them off to us, right? Because we're imparting that knowledge while they're with us on those campuses. So my principals had already begun working on what I call on-demand plans. That's what we demand for our students so that they have excellence at the campuses every day. But again, Abby, I feel like I've been talking to you all summer. I was talking to Abby about our systems that we were going to have when students return to campus, and that's when she directed me to a day in the life. So I was able to train my principals to plan for what it would look like from the time students arrived on campus, be it that they rode the bus or that their parents dropped them off at school, through lunch, through transitioning to the restroom breaks and specials, and then getting back home safely to their parents. So with that, I know that my teachers and my students are definitely safe because we have a plan for every moment of the day.
Thank you for mentioning that, and a huge shout out to McKinsey for sharing their incredible initiative with us. Just so everyone knows, and those of you who are school liaisons in particular, if you are working with your partner campus, know that we have access to those resources to help implement it campus by campus and make sure that a day in the life, whether it is through virtual, hybrid, or in-person learning, can be as well thought through as possible. And we thank them for sharing that resource with us. Pivoting back to Principal Barrios for a minute, you've seen a lot of tremendous progress on your campus. How do you think about ensuring the continued momentum of that achievement? And as you're thinking about some of your youngest students, developing readers, should our community be concerned about them potentially falling behind?
No, absolutely not. Jack Lowe Senior Elementary, we're a personalized learning campus, but I think that at all schools in Dallas ISD, we have a group of educators that are fighting hard and fighting against all odds to make sure that our students do not fall behind. And we want them to not fall behind, not only academically, but also, with the social injustices happening in the world. So one of the practices that we have changed here at Lowe is we've added equity into our PLCs. So as a guiding question for every single one of our PLCs, we start with, okay, what TEK are we addressing? What subject area are we addressing? How has this traditionally performed across the campus and in the different ethnicities represented? And what are we going to do to close that achievement gap? So we do revisit, we start with that question, we end with that question, and we make sure that everything is aligned so that we are consistently closing that gap. So I don't think that there is anything to fear. I mean, we are all in it to win it, and we are all in it to make sure that all of our students do not fall behind.
Well, you mentioned TEKS, and some of us know and some of us don't what TEKS is. You're an A-rated campus by the state, according to what TEA, what the Texas Education Agency has set forth. That is changing a little bit this year, but we've heard an awful lot about assessments that the district is putting in place. Can you tell us a little bit about what is MAP and how is that being implemented on your campus?
Sure. So we strongly believe at Jack Lowe that testing should be used to inform instructional practices and not to and to guide instruction, but it should never be used as a punishment tool or to define whether a child is is or isn't at a level, we just look at it as an opportunity to keep growing and to keep learning. So the MAP test is a universal instructional tool that is used at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the year, in which the students take a placement test to let us know where they are in their levels of reading and in math. And so once we have that information, we are ready to tailor practices that will be individualized to each student to be able to ensure their academic success. So that is another reason why parents should not be worried if their child falls behind, because we are consistently using that data to make sure that we are driving all instructional practices.
Mr. Rosas, are there other creative ways that you're conquering COVID slide?
Yeah, I want to go back to the MAPS testing. I think that's going to be very important because usually at the beginning of the year, I would pull up their last year's STAR data and I can get a sense of where they were, and I don't have that this year. So a lot of using that map data, and also the activities that you provide in the beginning, it's a lot of open response just to see how they're connecting to their reading and seeing how they express themselves, the way they participate, taking all kinds of data so that I can create a better picture because I'm not with them, in front of them. So any type of data point that I can get to learn better about who they are, that's what I've been trying to do as well.
Fantastic. Dr. Boyce, we'd love to know more about what you're seeing in your other trainings. Clearly, our educators could be overwhelmed at this point, but it also sounds like there's such leaders being very intentional about wanting the knowledge, about understanding the value of intentional diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so what other information, what framework, what lessons learned would you share with those who are perhaps not as far along as Mr. Rosas and Principal Barrios are speaking of today?
That was a loaded question. Loaded question.
Okay, we'll just go with top three. A little top three framing, you know?
Oh yeah. You did ask me about the top three. Well, I was just gonna say we do a pulse check at the beginning of the training, and there's a wide span, but I can say that a lot of what I see is based on the leadership of the campus and how they're come along. When I do a pulse check at Jack Lowe, it's different than another school that I'm doing a pulse check at, where they're like, my anxiety is high, I ain't got time for this, I might retire. And they're kind of like freaking out and taking on the anxiety of the moment. Whereas if I do the same kind of check at Jack Lowe, the teachers were more like, we're cautiously like easing into this, we're getting ready. And I think a lot of things we say don't come from top down, but I think how leaders are responding in this moment has a big effect. And so you asked about the top three things around framing. When we talk about culturally responsive teaching and moving forward into the school year, the first thing that I would say has to do with studying and centering students and their experiences. So right now, I think people are more open to doing that, which is the best practice that we talk about with culturally responsive teaching. Decentering the teacher and centering the student and their experience. And so right now people are having to do that. They're realizing that a student is at home and their siblings around, or whatever the different dynamics are. A lot of teachers are being brought into their students' homes for the first time, understanding what their realities are and having to reckon with that. And so when you talk about social and emotional learning, it's just a quite natural response when you are in someone's home that you will respond to their social and emotional needs, that you will include their interest in your lessons in the classroom practices, because they're kind of in your face, literally, whatever that reality is. And so we've been encouraging teachers to do this for years, for decades. This research has been out there, but now we're in a moment where these best practices, you either are going to do them or you're going to have that slide that you're talking about. You're going to lose some kids. You're going to have kids not showing up. And so that's the biggest thing that I think in this moment, teachers are being forced to have to center the experiences, the background knowledge, and really come to understand the cultural capital that their students possess. Because a lot of people view students showing up to schools from deficit perspectives, where they think, oh, these kids come from poverty and they don't have a lot, and we have to shift that. And that's what this work is about, helping people understand the cultural capital that their students have, What's already in their cup is what I like to say, and then what can you add to it? But knowing that they're so rich with culture and cultural capital when they show up. And so those are a couple of the main things that we're focusing on as we push into this different moment. I don't like to call it new normal. Different time.
Well, I love that frame. I love recognizing the richness that is within every one of our students. And I think if I sort of collectively have heard what you are all telling us, I think we have our marching orders. I know our teachers are stressed. I know that we're still dealing with limited public school budgets. So what I'm hearing is more teacher wellness initiatives. We can't forget teaching resources. We need more teaching resources on our campuses, and we will continue pushing forward on teaching training. So yes, yes, yes. You are all amazing individuals, amazing educators. I wish that I could pipe in, the crowd noise like they did in the bubble in Florida, or they're doing in Florida for the playoffs. I can hear the crowd cheering for you all. And I'm amazed by your optimism. Where are you finding hope in this experience? Are there other long-term positive impacts that you perceive we will all have based on our experience today? And I'll start with Dr. Wilson.
Absolutely. We have had the opportunity to create new learning experiences for students. We don't have to go back to the way that it was, and we shouldn't go back to the way that it was. Dr. Boyce, if I could have come off mute, I was like, amen over here. Like I was your amen corner. We've had to be so innovative, right? And we should continue to do so. We will be better than we were before. The way in which we use technology has provided with teachers the ability to support students in a variety of additional methods. What gives me hope? I thought about this really a couple days ago, and I thought about it again this morning. But what really gives me hope is when I think about our students who were never able to participate in class before. Our students who are on hospital homebound, our students who can't access the classroom, but now they'll be a part of the group. They'll be in a small group with a group of kids who are their age, learning the same things at the same time as them. So we get to reach so many students in such a different way. I think this is definitely our new way of schooling, and our students will be better because of it. That's what keeps me excited and gives me hope.
Principal Barrios.
We've learned so much through this pandemic, but I feel like the number one thing that keeps to mind is we always knew that teachers had to build a relationship with their students in order for their students to be successful. Every child needs a champion. And I feel like now more than ever, our teachers are connecting in ways that go much deeper than ever before with the students, with their families, with the district, with administration. So that gives me so much hope to see that we have all embraced relationships, and not just a student teacher, but in all of our lives. I value my relationship with my family in a whole different way now. Lord knows I see my spouse completely different than I did before. I'd never spent so much time with them. But those things, those relationships are what makes us human. As far as what gives me hope, I think the relationship that I have built with all of my colleagues and even my leadership. You mentioned Dr. Hinojosa. I will mention my executive director, Ms. Torres, and my colleagues have all really helped me be able to understand that I can do this, I will do this, and just kind of be a family for one another. So relationships overall.
It's interesting that you say the forced increase in technology has actually increased the importance of and value of relationships. I love that. Mr. Rosas, what would you add?
I'm feeling hopeful because this pandemic has uncovered this wound that we have not been wanting to look at: trauma and social injustice, and how they are connected, and how social injustice leads to trauma, and trauma leads to fewer learning opportunities for our students because it changes the way their brain learns. And now having this put on our faces, we have to, there's no other way, we can't look away anymore. And knowing how trauma affects our students and how trauma affects us as educators and administrators, and how that could impede connection with our students, I'm just seeing that through this darkness, there's flashes of light. And I'm also very proud of our district because I've seen a lot of push towards trauma-informed practices, social-emotional learning, support for our teachers as well. There's that mental health services. And so I'm very hopeful that through this traumatic experience, we're going to be able to look at ourselves, look at our population, and find ways to connect and come together to move forward.
Dr. Boyce?
What he said is my, no, but really that's the first part of it is I have hope because I see in this moment how people are stepping up to the plate. And I feel like spending years doing this work and saying, hey, we need to talk about racial bias. Hey, we need to talk about how these things show up in our classrooms and what we do with kids. And having people be like, oh, yeah, that's like ancillary. That's something that's on the side. That's something extra. It's not what's most important. I think having this moment where everyone is reckoning with these truths about racial injustice in our country, its origins, how it impacts everything that we do is one thing. But I have hope because I see how having safe spaces to have and engage in these conversations transform the minds of educators. And so at Jack Lowe, I'll say this quickly because it's the last piece about my hope. But there was a teacher when they came out of their small group conversation when they had to talk about how often they, what percentage of the time they feel their racial identity. And when they came out of the group, one of the teachers that decided to share was a white teacher who had listened to a Hispanic teacher in her group talk about how sometimes, even with her colleagues, she's less likely to share, to talk, to speak, to share her thoughts and ideas. And she's a professional adult. Because English wasn't her first language. And she's always thinking about, am I going to say it right? Is someone going to judge me because of how I say something in a professional setting with her colleagues? And it blew my mind listening to that, but also it blew the mind of her colleagues that never knew. And if they did not have a safe space to discuss it, they would have never known that that was something she was experiencing. And so I have hope because if adults can start to understand how race and bias impacts us in the workplace as adults, then they also get to see how that dynamic changes when people are in positions of authority with students and how the students show up and feel. And so I get tingly. I start getting the spirit and I'm like, that gives me hope because when we have these aha moments, I know they'll transform our consciousness. And that's something that I am grateful for in this moment. And I have hope that we'll push that work forward and not just let it be a small moment and then like move on from it.
Well, I think now everyone understands why I said at the beginning, what an amazing individual you are, transforming the education landscape for so many. And you know, you're transforming campuses and school communities and broader from that. Our team, our network, we get our hope from all of you, your leadership, your dedication, my goodness, the resilience of your teaching staff and the promise of those 26,000 students that we are fortunate to work with. I know that the late John Lewis and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is fresh on all of our minds, as in they liked to remind us the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. If there is a steadfast commitment to see this task through to completion, there is few better examples than all of you to a testament of that commitment to see the task through to completion. We feel so blessed to be in partnership with you all, and thank you for spending your time and lending your perspective with all of us today. We're going to come back to questions for all of you, so don't go away. Speaking of those with a steadfast commitment to our community, I also want us to hear from Miguel Solis, who is one of our district trustees. to share a little bit about the upcoming bond election for Dallas ISD. United to Learn is also fortunate to have Miguel's leadership on our board of directors. So I want him to share why the bond election is so important to further so much of the work that we've spoken about today, and how it's going to affect each one of us as Dallasites. So with that, Miguel, can I turn it over to you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Abby, for the invitation to speak to this group. And I just want to reiterate the closing words that you had related to our educators and external partners who are doing just tremendous work in some extremely challenging times. And I got to tell you, I'm super inspired to see how they have adapted to the current circumstances so well, and especially over these past 2 weeks with the beginning of school, how quickly they figured out a way to make it work for our kids. I wish I could match that readiness. Today was my first day back in an office setting, and I literally walked into a glass wall from ceiling to floor, which I thought was an opening to get into the office. That just shows you how far behind I am in reacclimating myself to the outside world. So again, thank you so much to our educators. As you mentioned, Abby, we have a massive election coming up in November. I think even aside from the bond, there's just so much going on November the 3rd, which is the day the final day to vote, the general election day. But more specifically, as it relates to Dallas ISD, we have a lot at stake. And I want to make sure that your network is aware of both the concept of the bond and what it could mean for our students. So I'll briefly take the viewers through a quick presentation on propositions A through E, which are the Dallas ISD bond propositions. Before I go any further, let me just ground us in some major facts and some positive news. The ISD, really over the past decade, has made tremendous strides related to academic progress. With the new Texas standard of A through E performance ratings, in Dallas ISD, we have more A-rated campuses than any other school district in Texas. That's a huge positive that we should be celebrating. Additionally, we have superior financial rating. I think, many people on this Zoom can think back to, about 2 decades ago when our finances were not the best. But over the past 5 years, we've gotten the superior financial rating from the Texas Education Agency's financial integrity rating system. And that's absolutely something that we should be proud of. Additionally, I think you can't argue this anymore. We are the most improved large city school system in Texas over the past 5 years. And this is something that is proven through data, but also, shared in public by people like Texas Education Commissioner Mike Morath. So again, something we should be proud of. And then finally, from a state and a national model standpoint, Dallas ISD has really set the mark for comprehensive school finance reform and is beginning to prove the idea that you can turn around large bureaucratic systems. So it's important that I think your viewers recognize all of these tremendous strides that have been made over the past decade, and even more importantly, recognize that every single one of these things that I just listed has an impact on student achievement and the future of our students. With that being said, there are certain things in Dallas ISD that don't necessarily match the positive things that I've just talked to you about. And the biggest thing that I think we could point to are our school facilities. So we've done a recent audit that has identified critical maintenance updates that are needed at over 200 school campuses in DISD. Things like, asbestos that we have got to take care of, waterproofing our windows so that the environment inside the classroom can remain safe. HVAC maintenance, just making sure that our classrooms are cool. and you listen to all of the great work that our educators are doing, and then we expect them in some campuses to do it in Texas, summers with 100-degree weather. So our schools are seriously aging and they need an update. On top of that, though, when we look at our neighboring ISDs and think about the way that they're funding their facilities, they actually have more funding. And because of that, they've got better facilities. When we take money in Dallas ISD, we put those monies into two separate buckets. One of them is our maintenance and operation bucket, which allows us to do innovative programming, some of which you've heard about today. But additionally, in our interest and sinking bucket, which basically funds our facilities. And our INS tax funding ranks 24th amongst North Texas school districts, while at the exact same time, our poverty is 3 times greater than the average of 23 higher ranked ISDs. So funding right now, at least on the INS side of things, is not matching need. Also, as has been mentioned earlier in the conversation, inequity in our city is still rampant. And we got even more specific as a school system in understanding neighborhood by neighborhood what this inequity, or rather this disinvestment, looks like in our communities. And we created something in partnership with the Child Poverty Action Lab called the Community Resource Index, which took every single campus in DISD and took a 2-mile radius around it and essentially contextualized advantage and disadvantage, and then rank ordered every single campus against each other. This is a really innovative concept because for the first time now, we were able to understand essentially block by block what communities have what and what communities don't have. That's super important, but in the grand scheme of things, it's important to just recognize that we are still a hyper-segregated city that got this way because of intentional urban planning policies rooted in race and racism over a century that we have to reckon with. So, what is Proposition A through E going to do to try to remediate all of these things that I just stated? Well, it's going to provide renovations and critical updates to almost every Dallas school. It's going to advance racial equity through 3 major concepts: family resource centers, career training, and improve access to technology. Additionally, it's the right time to do this from both a federal monetary standpoint or an interest rate standpoint, and also because we have a ton of deferred maintenance that we've got to take care of now. If we don't take care of it now, then that's just going to keep piling up, and it's going to be even more expensive to try to address it in the coming years. And then finally, we can do all of this at no cost to the taxpayer. So let's dive deep into this very quickly. Propositions A through E will be a spending breakdown of essentially $3.2 billion for critical maintenance needs for 232 schools. So it'll be the largest bond in the history of the state of Texas, but we're trying to do in one fell swoop what we know we've needed to do for many years. Proposition B is going to be focused on technology updates, and you've now mentioned, I think a couple of times, the notion of operation connectivity, ensuring that every single kid in Dallas ISD has access to broadband. That will be one of the numerous things we do in Proposition B. Proposition C's through E will be extracurricular facility improvements, including things like athletic facilities, performance arts, and other things as well, totaling roughly $3.7 billion. One thing to note for everybody watching, all of these propositions are going to be happening at the bottom of your ballot. So you've got to vote for your people, and then you've got to go all the way to the bottom and vote for this as well. Very quickly, what will this actually look like? You've seen the numbers, but how can you visualize it? So from a from a renovation update standpoint, it looks like new facilities, or it looks like taking facilities that exist right now and making them look new, allowing our kids to be proud of what their facilities look like when they walk in. Additionally, through advancing racial equity, we'll see things like family resource centers, which will take the Community Resource Index values and then allow us to go to the neighborhoods right now that have got the most disadvantage because of this historical inequity from urban planning patterns, and expand campuses to do things like help feed our community members or give them mental health services, and so on and so forth. Additionally, career training centers, which will allow us to take our collegiate and career academies, which will right now is already allowing high school kids to graduate DISD with a high school diploma, with an associate's degree from a Dallas County Community College District School, and career training with one of numerous corporate partners to be able to ensure that they are successful in the 21st century workforce, and improve access to technology, as I've mentioned. The other thing is that the longer that we wait to do this, the more expensive it becomes. You should know that we've got a growing deferred maintenance list, and the longer that we wait, the more that that's going to cost us. Right now, we know that we've got about $4.4 billion in facilities needs. In 2015, we passed a $1.5 billion bond, and you can recognize that we still need some more. So this will actually allow us to be able to fulfill that shortfall. Additionally, our bond debt right now is reasonable compared to other districts as well on a student by student basis. And then finally, because interest rates are historically low, we actually save money right now. So it's important for all of my federal monetary wonks out there. You should know that right now, the current rates are at 2%. Historically, when we've gone after bonds, the rate's been roughly 3.15%. So it's a great time right now to be taking on debt. And then finally, which I think is one of the most important things for you to know, we can do this at a tax rate that will remain the same, which means that there won't be a tax rate increase for you. Our current INS tax rate is 24 pennies per $100 of valuation. It's been that way since 2014, and we are going to make sure that that remains the rate moving forward as well. But because of politics down in Austin, there has now been a new attachment to this bond language, which will say that this will be a tax increase. That's not going to be the case for this bond, but the legislature passed this rule, and any bond proposition that's put on a ballot has to include this language, because there are certain bonds that actually are a tax rate increase. That won't be the case for this one. So when do we vote? Election day is on November the 3rd. Registration deadlines by mail, you need to have your registration mailed out and postmarked by no later than October the 5th. And then if you are going to go in person to register, you need to do it by October the 5th. Absentee ballots, that's a huge thing right now to try to vote during the pandemic. You need to request that absentee ballot by October the 23rd. And if you're returning it by mail, you need to postmark it by November 3rd. And then finally, early voting is happening from October the 13th through October the 30th. In case you wanted more information, you can go to www.dallascountyvotes.org. That'll give you additional information and actually personalize it for you. And then finally, how can you specifically help? You can do a lot of things. You can request a yard sign through dallascountyvotesforkids.com/get involved. You can share pre-scripted social posts by following their Twitter accounts, their Facebook accounts, their Instagram accounts, which you can also find at the website. You can talk to your friends and to your family about voting. And you can become a partner organization with Dallas County Votes for Kids. So, in sum, our kids need this. It's the perfect time. It advances all of the great work that we've been doing, and it helps us support the very people that you just heard from for the first 40 minutes of this presentation. And with that, Abby, I'm happy to turn it over to questions or leave it there and just make sure that everybody goes out and votes positively for these props.
Thanks, Miguel. But actually, we'll start our first question coming right back to you. Some of this is a little complicated, and as you pointed out on that additional notice on the bonds, it's even sometimes confusing. I loved your list of 3 or 4 things that folks could do. That was the question while you were speaking. How can we, as the viewers, as the listeners, get these nuggets of information out? I think that's a call for either a one-pager or a sharing of your slides. So tell us how you think that we can best address that. Should we go to your website there? And can we share out these slides as well? So I think Carol is saying that we can. I can't quite hear Miguel. Maybe some of you can.
Yeah, I was just making sure that you all understood that I absolutely have failed when it comes to adapting to COVID-19 things. Despite the numerous Zooms I've been on, I still can't figure out the mute stuff. So anyway, this is the most efficient and effective way to be able to get involved. If you'll go to DallasVotesForKids.com, there are a host of resources there for you. But I think the most important thing is there's always going to be something more that you will want, or more questions that you want to have answered. And so there are ways to communicate with people involved with Dallas Votes for Kids. If you want to know a little more about what Dallas Votes for Kids is, it's actually an organization that has been started since the bond has been voted out by the Board of Trustees to try to get the community involved. And there are a lot of different people that are involved, including people like myself. So we're happy to answer your questions. And this is absolutely the most effective way to get involved.
Thanks, Miguel. This next question has to do with our families. And maybe Dr. Wilson or Mr. Rosas, can you speak a little bit to what you are seeing and what families might be struggling with, and ways that educators, some of you mentioned just tangentially that some were reaching out to families. Can you speak a little bit more to parent engagement in academic journeys? Dr. Wilson?
So what I've seen is an increased level of engagement in the way that we would think about it, because parents don't have to make a choice anymore. They don't have to choose between going to work or showing up at PTO and things like that. Some of the concerns that they had, I think as a district, we've done a great job at addressing with making sure that they have hotspots and the technology that they need. And we've added additional sites for students to be able to get lunch and have lunch when we're doing map testing. So I think the plans that we've put in place as a district are working to support our students who are still at home with their families, if that's the question that you were asking me.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Mr. Rosas, are you able to talk to parents for the students that are assigned to you and part of your classes?
Yes. The week before school started, I was able to connect all my parents through the app Remind, and I'm constantly in communication with parents. Sometimes I start the day with, I'm sorry if you're gonna get all these messages, but the parents, they react to the messages with thumbs up, with smiley faces. They want that constant feedback from the teacher, especially because the kids are home and they don't know, how is my kid supposed to be doing this? How do we do that? Also, recording myself, YouTube videos. I even recorded a TikTok to inform them about testing. I put the letter on the back and I'm like, whatever I can do to get parents involved and engaged, or just provide the information, because parents want to be involved, but sometimes it's hard for them to ask for that help. So if I can make that accessible to them so they don't have to feel ashamed or scared to ask, I'm going to do it.
I think this question actually goes back to you as well, Mr. Rosas. This is talking about our youngest learners, our English language learners. So across all of the United to Learn schools, roughly 55% of our students are English language learners. But as students come back to campus and they are wearing masks, how concerned are you, how concerned is your principal about how we are imparting English language lessons and learning English in particular when people are in a mask?
Well, I think we're going to have to get very creative and use a lot of the resources that have always been available through the district, like Clever. There's a bunch of applications and video sites and like Reading A through Z that we can take advantage of in this moment. Yeah, we see the obstacle of the mask, but then with any obstacle, there's some way to go around it or above it or under it. And so here at BurtNet, we're very lucky to have a lot of synergy with our teachers. Like I'm constantly texting the third grade teacher. So together, we're like building up this ladder to climb out of this pandemic sort of dilemma. So yeah, a lot of communication, lots of using of resources that we haven't used before, and just being creative and using our anxiety as fuel to do special stuff. Yeah.
Gotcha. Ms. Barrios, I see you nodding your head. Do you have a couple of examples of how teachers are being creative on your campus or plan to?
Yeah, no, I mean, our teachers are being very, very creative in a variety of ways. Anything from, you know, the bubble groups that the district has helped us with. But I mean, I've been in classrooms where they have their desks separated out and they've now turned them into what looks like a little car. I think that was going around in Facebook for a minute. So I think everybody picked up on that one. And so we've kind of made like little huts out of their desks and what they're using in the classroom. So no, the teachers are just really kind of seeing the mask as not even a barrier, more like, okay, it's just something else and we'll figure out how to go around it because it's just something else. But it's not something that's going to impede us from being with our students and teaching them. We're just happy to see them back, you know. We were really excited when just recently on the 28th, I believe, we're about to get a new set of pre-K and K kids. But even on the 17th, when a group of kids started coming in, we were so excited to see them. And with a mask, you could still see that the children were like, yay, you know. So there's a lot of visual and kinesthetic movement happening, but we're excited and we know that the kids are too.
Dr. Boyce, I've got a few folks saying, asking, is she available for meetings and trainings beyond schools? So it sounds like there are some in the business community and across our across other organizations that might be looking for additional assistance. Is that something that you're open to?
Yeah, thanks so much for that. Definitely, we do diversity and inclusion training. And that's, you know, really awesome for schools and teachers, but that's really awesome for everyone. And so, yes, we're always open to navigating into different industries. Usually at the core of all of the trainings, it's the same thing. It's seeking first to understand and then be understood and then talk about what that means when we talk about race and culture and bias, and that's something that is definitely needed in professional settings across industries. So for sure, they can visit thefreshclassroom.com and we have, and they can contact through the website for training opportunities.
Okay, fantastic. I do have one last question with regard to students who are hearing impaired across our district. And are there particular modifications that are being made for those students? Dr. Wilson?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that our special education department is working to provide and make sure we meet the needs of all of the students who receive services through an IEP. So I think in the virtual world, you'll be able to see a little bit, and they have those teachers who come into the classrooms just like our students who have other learning differences, where we have resource teachers to come in the classrooms with the students. So I'm sure, well, I'm not sure because I said I don't know, but I would imagine that our teachers who are certified as hearing impaired are doing that same and providing the same service for students. But I can look into that and get back with you if you get the name of that person and I can get them a real answer.
Fantastic, fantastic, thank you. In closing, do any of the panelists have anything else that they'd like to share with the group?
I do. I just want to say thanks. And if you don't know a principal, thank a principal. Our principals have put together amazing supports for students. I have seen students with classrooms set up in their homes. They have whiteboards, they have response cards, they have just every instructional tool that you would expect to be in a classroom. And that's due to the work of the principals. They've gone and put together teams and knocked on doors of students to make sure that they're prepared and to make sure that they continue to receive an excellent education. So thank you to our principals for their leadership, and thank you for our teachers for always jumping on and going with the crazy ideas that the principals come up with.
Absolutely. Miguel?
I would add one more thing, and that's simply to say to all of the viewers, the work of United to Learn was always important work prior to the pandemic. But I've got to tell you that post-pandemic, coming out of this, the work of United to Learn and all of you that are watching this got exponentially more important. So I would just encourage you all to continue to remain engaged. And if there was anything keeping you on the sidelines up to this point, I ask that you come off those sidelines and really throw yourself into this work, because our kids are going to need us, and our city is going to need us as well. So again, thank you for hosting this, and thank you so much to all of the other panelists for the work that you're doing to support the children of Dallas ISD.
Thanks, Miguel. Thanks for that awesome, generous message. And thank you all for joining us. To everyone in the audience, you can follow our journey with not just the schools that were mentioned today, but all 47 of the United to Learn partner schools by checking us out on our website or on our YouTube channel. And you can find ways to volunteer either virtually or in safe, socially distanced ways. I hope you all have a blessed day. Bye-bye.